formed in a dream, kept in a thought, carried across oceans, spoken in whispers, passed down from elders, planted in gardens of okra, prayed for in sanctuary, resisted with fury, protected with faith, created with love, born into being, from root to bone. You are here.
This podcast talks about colonial, racial, and gender-based violence. Please listen at your own pace and capacity. And remember to do what you need to do to care for yourself if you feel activated by this content. Should you need resources, please check out our section on resources at decolonizingtherapy.com. Be well. Greetings, 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 my good people. Welcome. This is Dr. Jenn, and welcome to the From Root to Bone podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you here today. The ask before I introduce our wonderful, wonderful guests is for you to find a way to center in, connect in with breath, with body, with a sense of comfort, with a sense of warmth or coolness, depending on what it is that your body, your palate, your skin, your spirit is asking for in this moment. And a reminder that oftentimes that centering and being here now doesn't necessarily mean being still. That is one of the reasons that I am so excited about introducing our next guest and reading to you a little bit from their amazing work. Because our next guest has allowed me in a time where I feel like nervous system regulation is everywhere. Everyone is talking about like regulating your nervous system. And I have to be honest, when I first heard our guest start to talk about, and maybe these are not their exact words, but this like oppressiveness of even the term regulation and how often it's used, I was like, yeah, serve me. and I just felt so deeply seen because oftentimes, personally speaking, I would work with a somatic coach or a body worker, and it would be great for the moment. But oftentimes I became fixated with the sense that I needed to have a highly regulated nervous system. And I thought to myself, what does a highly regulated nervous system look like in my own process, in my own work? What does a highly regulated nervous system look like? I'm a super visual, neurospicy, highly sensitive, receiving information constantly and needing to put it somewhere else person. So what does that look like when hypothetically and perhaps you're constantly and consistently receiving information from multiple places, spaces, and sources? Right? So how do you file that? How does that work out? How does that get organized? So I am interested in this episode and us really diving into attunement, somatics, the nervous system, and really understanding the complexity of, in my opinion, what a lack of authenticity does to us. Authenticity with self, right? And that's something that I've been diving into within myself as well. Like, what does that mean to hold tension between one or more things being true? Right. And why are we obsessed with this sort of like black and white thinking? And a lot of us know why. Hello, white bodied supremacy and patriarchy and heterosexism and ... Right. And you know, the podcast you came to, it is what it is. Right. We're always going to talk about how forms of oppression, right, continue to impact our joy and our fucking well-being and our ability to be and land safely in our bodies from moment to moment, with each other and apart from one another. And so I'm going to read to you. But first, I'm also going to bring in a really sacred statue that was given to me by my sister friend, Rebecca Vicente, Dr. Rebecca Vicente, many, many years ago, before I connected to the Green Tara. So allow me to say that Buddhism has been in and around me probably for my entire life in some way, shape, or form. Meditation assisted my mother, and she found herself. That's a whole other story for a whole other time. I don't want to get off on tangent, but allow me to say that when I went to a doctoral program, a Western doctoral program in California for clinical psychology, one of the things that attracted to me is that it was extremely Buddhist in nature, right? And it was something about the philosophies and this perspective of detachment, right? Not detachment that I don't care, but detachment of understanding surrender differently, understanding that
Mhm.
grief is inevitable, as detachment and understanding that all relationships change and flow. And so when the green Tara was introduced to me and in my life, I never realized how her magnanimous medicine would keep giving and giving and giving. And so recently I attended I'm going to say this wrong. I always say it wrong. Vipanyasa, but basically,
Vipassana.
thank you, boo. Thank you. Thank you. A silent ass retreat. And I'm a talker 10, we know. And I attended a silent retreat with Brother Lama Radowins up in the countryside in London. And I just wanted to be and deal with some grief that I knew was going to be flooding and coming in this year and next in a very big collective level, because I feel for the collective, which has pros and cons. Um, and one of our mantras was a greeting to the mother, and it was Om Ma Tara Soha. And as a collective, maybe 60, 70 people in this room were chanting and singing and sobbing and patting themselves. And I felt and I opened and I cracked open.
Mm.
And for me, that was a point of being in attunement with me and my
Mm.
system. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's why
Yeah.
I wanted to bring this in. So at the time when my friend gave me this statue, I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. What are we doing? Is
Mhm.
this appropriation? What are we?" Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? But now that I have more and more connection to Tara, I feel a deep love and a deep care, and I go back to these Ma Tara mantras and or this
Mm.
statue in order to tether myself. So that is what I'm going to place on our virtual altar. Okay,
That's
y'all, the moment
beautiful.
you've been waiting for. Yeah. So this beautiful being, let me tell you, when this individual started talking, I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, who's this?" Right? Like I love getting and I say this with all love, respect and consensuality. I love having intellectual crushes, right? It just makes me a better person, right? As a Cancer sun, we're always just like, "Oh, I love when new energy comes into the world, in my world, because you've been in this world, and it feels refreshing and tethered." And I say this as a fellow quirky, like quirky
Mhm.
in a sweet, real, present, I'ma show up and be me way. It
Uh-huh.
just and with so much black brownness, right? Like oh, so much you-ness, right? And so um I'm gonna read the selection and then I'm gonna introduce Asia properly because they've been listening to me go on for a bit. Okay. So the Aasia Lewis has said, ready? Everybody ready? Okay, I just want to make sure we're ready. Trying to keep it together all the time is an oppressive state. It takes an enormous amount of energy to appear stable when you're orgasmically not. That energy can be better used to explore the turbulence and uproot the weeds of shame, doubt, and self loathing. We have been colonized to suppress, repress, and depress. Come on, spirit. I'm going to say that again. We have been colonized to suppress, repress, and depress the wild expression of our emotions. Decolonize by allowing safe, authentic, and full expression of your life forces experiences. The nervous system's responses for fight, flight, and freeze and fawn have healthy expressions that allow us to defend ourselves and maintain our safety. They are necessary responses we access to ensure our growth and eventual autoregulation. When we only have access to one response due to disturbed childhoods, we lose access to a robust life experience. By learning how to access all four responses, we can ensure that we are meeting the demands of life and events of change with presence and autonomy. And okay, there's just one more little bit. Just receive that, Athea. Okay, just receive, an audience receive. And I normally don't read this much for a person, but I told you I was just intellectually crushing. I just couldn't. I couldn't contain. So I have all of this for y'all. Okay. So, the true goal of the human nervous system experience is autoregulation as per organic intelligence. This kind of regulation that kicks in automatically when we recognize two fundamental things: we have no control, and everything happens for a reason. The regulation, I'm doing air quotes if you cannot visually see me right now, that is often spoken about is referring to self regulation, which is one step up from dysregulation. Self regulation is the constant tending and stabilizing of our system through active implementation of strategies and techniques such as boundaries, orientation, and breathing. Sorry about that. And deep breathing. Self regulation is a step we must become proficient in before we can move to auto regulation. However, many of us are getting stuck in self regulation, thinking it's the final step, and struggling to recognize the bigger picture with our nervous system responses. They are occurring to point out deeply ingrained behaviors and beliefs and leading us in the direction of autoregulation. In other words, illuminating what we must be willing to let go of so that we can access equanimity during life's peaks and valleys. If you are hyperfixating on being, quotation marks currently, regulated, you will likely miss those insights. I would like to introduce our guests. Through her personal desire for a more embodied mental health practice, Aasia Lewis has created space as a yoga educator, certified somatic coach, and body worker to help others see themselves clearly and deeply. Asia offers encouragement to curiously explore one's inner terrain. Through her yoga, somatic, and communication practices, she offers distinctive movement and energy analysis to reveal asymmetries and blockages within the soma, the body people, as well as perceptive insights on one's interpersonal relationships, self expression, and overall life exploration. Can we have a loud woot woot and round of applause for Aasia Lewis? How are you doing?
Oh my goodness. Waiting to exhale much? I felt myself sitting and this like lifting and lifting and lifting. I mean, I just I'm like so happy. I'm so like with it. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be able to discuss these things, to hear my words, and to be introduced in this way is just like very, like, nourishing in a way that, you don't really receive often. How many times is someone sitting there and reading, your words to you and sort of, extending very clear appreciation for, what you're doing in the world or just naming what it is that you're doing. So, I'm feeling very lit and very, received and very loved in this moment for this, like, beautiful intro. Thank you so
You-
much.
You're so welcome, and I hope you can continue to receive it as we continue to just like unfurl, not unpack, right?
Mhm,
Like unfurl in a
mhm,
way that feels good and consensual to you, what you want to
mhm.
tell us about you. So, yeah, if you can remember what it was like writing that, or maybe something that was going on, what do you want to tell us about what you heard and how you received that, Asia?
Um, yeah, I just being on the social media world is just not what it's No one, I mean, I definitely did not ask. And I'm just like, I'm a wee little person. There are people who have hundreds of thousands, but I'm swimming in what feels like the meat of our worlds and generations, like just like the zeitgeist, like what are the talking points, what are the things, and I think it's beautiful in that way that social media can kind of like offer this like distillation, like this funneling of like these are the big things that everyone's talking about and this is how it's being interpreted. And so I remember contacting this annoyance, deep love in the form of annoyance, deep
Yes.
grief in the form of annoyance, of just like how I'm watching people speak and experience their life force through this siphoned belief system, or just like it's not getting enough vetting. There's not enough curiosity there, and these are like really necessary ingredients when you're thinking about the complexity of the human. So I just felt like let me just let me just say something, and if it resonates, it resonates, and if it doesn't, it doesn't take away from the potency of it, and it doesn't take away from the truthfulness of it. And so yeah, I remember recognizing after I read this article by Pete Walker on trauma typology that I really felt like people needed to understand that like these nervous system responses are essential, and they offer their own support in a way that I felt like was not getting really clarified on the grander scale to all of those who don't have the time and resources to be researching and doing all the things that we do. I mean, that's my way I'm contributing. I do have the time and the space. So yeah, I remember the like, oh, I want this to stick. And so I was like going in like, you cannot do this. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, because your videos are so real and digestible, approachable, right? Because so often I hate the word approachable in proximity to any kind of blackness, because I feel like it's just
Mm,
automatically just saying some other shit, right? But
yep.
like, but approachable in that it's like hearing what you're saying, receiving it, and then like, oh, wait, yeah, I see how this pertains to me, my life, my world.
Mm,
And as I was saying earlier, this like obsession with like the nervous system, and in some ways maybe there needs to be. So I guess I want to ask you, like, how did this work start for you? In some ways,
mm,
like your origins related to the nervous system, so to speak, and any of your opinions about it. I know I'm asking a lot of questions, so I'll stop. But like, what is the
mm,
nervous system? What is the darn nervous system? Someone's listening to this, like, everyone uses that word and everyone talks about regulation and all that, but like, what are we talking about
mm.
here?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Origins was human conception. No, 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 for real, for real. Um, uh, I think I knew at some point when I was training to be a yoga teacher, um, even moving to New York City, like at the age of 25, like no community, like just here for like masters and stuff. And I really started to sense in that I needed some kind of practice, just period. And I always had a lot of athleticism in my youth. I just like enjoyed sweating. There's just an excess intensity in like the psychomotor area where I'm like talking really fast and like running and just like doing all kinds of stuff. And so I was like, okay, I need something to do. And I was like, yoga, which, I think about it now, didn't really it's not really gonna meet that intensity's need. Um, but as I was yeah, I was like, but it helped actually because I was getting really fed by New York City's intensity and urgency.
Mm.
So it kind of offered a little bit of that like reprieve of like, here you can come and sit and I say this because even though I think about it, it's not necessarily like this huge point, but there was a person that I met in my teacher training that spoke to anatomy and physiology in a very philosophical way, like poetic, and it just ensnared me. I was like, oh, we are not these like mechanical beings, like even talking about ourselves as like a lightness of being. I just was drawn to the vocab of it all. And I remember having, interactions with this person, doing a little bit of mentoring, and it widened my purview that there's a lot that we are housing. And it's only when someone, very kindly holds our hand and points these things out, or in a fear fright response, like pushes us some water and is like, just relax, just drink, it's okay, right? And it just dawned on me that it's a whole system that we have no we have no training, that we have no education, like we are lost. We are just It's just a drop off, as I say, from like adolescence to adult. And in adult is when you really start to take on these truths that, like, we are complex beings. We are shaped by our environments. Like, there is no landscape but the social landscape. And you really can't go to spirit before that. It's incredibly negligent. And so I was noticing all the bypassing, and I was like, how am I in all these like white spaces trying to get seen as a Black girl? Like, it just started to collapse on me. So that's sort of to just touch like how this became, I was confronted. I mean, I was in
Mm.
this space over and over, and I was like, I am not getting some needs met. And I had to really respect that confrontation of like, you're not in a space that can meet you, because people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. And when you are in a configuration that is meeting a lot of resistance, a lot of suppression, you cannot go to someone who does not have that embodied experience. You're just gonna hurt your feelings, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the nervous system is a complex thing, and I think it's just recognizing that, like, it is, right, it's nervous, right? It's filled with nerves, and it's really like, how can I use this language of, it's like a f okay, if I use the word fractal, we're talking about how something that will repeat itself and self-generate and self-repeat, and so I use that because it's like, look at, like, I'm looking at trees right now outside of my window. Like, look at anything in nature that has this repeating, self-generating, and then just imagine this concept or constitution exists inside of you. It's
Mm.
a system of repetition, of expression, of windings, of circles, and it gets shaped by what it experiences throughout its life. And what happens is, if these things are not tended to, um things start to coagulate, right? So there's like all this like there's knots, which Carl Jung would talk about as a complex. There's these knots in our
Mm.
being because of things we've experienced, and we just have not maybe gone and disentangled what's there. But it really gives us a lot of information about like how we're doing, how we're processing things. And I mean, it is. I mean, I don't want to be reductive. It is a complex thing, and I don't think it can be put in a sentence. And I think it, just like myself, like, I needed to sit with this for years. And where are y'all going? Nowhere. You got the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like, first step is the hardest step.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm hearing, I love this idea of fractals, and I love this
Mm,
idea of that pattern and that expression also being seen within ourselves, and
mhm,
it thinking of ourselves as needing one another, right? Especially in these times. And I think that many of us have been shouting this on the top of rooftops, like, right, we can't expect these systems or governments or policies that were never
mhm.
made for many of us to suddenly be the savior and support of us.
Right.
Right? That they're working exactly as they were intended to and constructed to.
Yes.
But we can see us and
Mhm,
we can help
mhm.
us and we can support us. And as you're talking about the nervous system, what also comes up for me is this, like, okay, so then there's so much that's also been gotten wrong, because when I frequently hear, well, let me ask you, like, what does that mean to like regulate our nervous system? right? And is there anything that, in your humble opinion, honey, you believe that we might be getting a bit fucked up? What are we getting wrong?
What's up? I I just love me for this question. You just love me for putting this in. Like, okay, so where do I wanna I'm okay, regulation, I think the umbrella concept that I want people to understand is that if we are housed within these colonial systems that we know lack humanity, there just needs to be a little bit more due diligence with words that we use and with practices that we adopt when we are not rooting them in social betterment. I mean, it doesn't end or begin with you. I mean, actually, you could say it begins with you, but it definitely doesn't end with you. And so for a teaching to be just totally consumed in the person's betterment, it's an incomplete teaching. It's not complete. It's very helpful. It's not complete. And I think that's
Yes.
what I was mentioning when you were reading the quote earlier, that like it's not it's not complete what this idea that like, okay, I can be in the world a certain way and not have any responsibility outside of myself,
Yeah.
right? So I think what's just frustrating with regulation is that if you were to look it up, because many people are in this wild, wild west of online by themselves, and they'll hear a word and they'll just like Google it. So, it has a lot of words like insinuations like control and supervise and even bringing something towards like a standard. Like, okay, when we're regulating something, it has this like almost like this forceful taking, and like, I'm gonna put you back somewhere because I need to regulate you, and I am the one that's watching. It creates all of this like disconnect, and
Yes.
it has very masculine energy towards it, where you're just like doing it. There's no room for like just welcoming like the experience. Um so it's frustrating because within the frameworks of capitalism and this supremacy, it gives this default experience of like, oh, I'm not feeling clear, or I'm not feeling uh stable. Let me just go and self-soothe. Because that's what we're doing. When we're doing regulation, we're self-soothing. And listen, if you have a violent PTSD flashback, if you're having intense panic, if you're dissociating, please self-soothe, because you are truly being attacked by your memories and your thoughts, and
Mm.
it's violent. So please regulate yourself, air quotes. Please like self-soothe and bring a certain amount of safety and stability
Mhm.
back into your system. That is what nervous system regulation is for. You
Mhm.
are going into this episode of destabilizing unsafety. And right now, my point of contention is, if you're not experiencing violent PTSD or intense panic or dissociation, and you're self-soothing because someone cut you off in traffic, and it maybe unearthed some anger you've been chilling on, or some free floating hostility you have, you going to self-soothe is not ever giving yourself the opportunity to say like, well, why did this trigger me? Because
Me.
someone cut me off this morning and it didn't piss me off, but maybe it's compounded. Maybe this is the second time. Maybe I just got a call from someone who said, I can't help you. Or, like, it's like things get snagged in us, and some things pass through and some things get hooked. And that is what I'm wanting to contest, that like this obsession with regulation, you're not leaving room for curiosity of like, well, why is this thing disrupting me in this way? And then there's these lamentations in the future about like, I keep meeting the same person, I keep going through the same situations. Well, every time the situation presents itself, you're busy regulating and self-soothing, and then you're not learning the insights from this quote unquote chaotic energy.
Yeah.
So there are two camps. There are people who have experienced prolonged neglect and very, very deep trauma that are having these dysregulating moments that need to self-soothe and regulate. Fine, I am not truly talking to those individuals. I'm talking to another huge portion of the population that has not, that is just aggravated with living in certain cities or living within certain, systems, and there's just a desire to not feel. Okay, well then we have a problem then. If you're not interested in feeling what's happening inside of you, you will be repeating the same patterns, and at some point it's going to become frustrating, and then it will create psychosomatic expressions. It will create autoimmune challenges because there's not a flow and there's not a release of the things that are coming to trying to alert you or trying to give you some insight. So that's where I'm just at. I'm just like, it's not something you can just be like regulate. Like what? No, look at me like hitting, but like you can't just keep regulating love. Like you can't keep doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful breakdown and the example and the like highlighting of the kind of two camps, right? And I think
Mm,
that even this word and this understanding of trauma, as someone who's been trained as a clinical psychologist, right? Like
right.
trauma, it's so interesting. When I was starting my trainings, it was like, yeah, here's a little bit of trauma, but really people's minds are basically fucked. Right? Like it was sort of this like
Interesting.
if anything, I remember being in internship and working full time at a partial care unit in a hospital in Newark, New Jersey, UMD&J at the time. Now it's called, I think, like
Mm,
Robert Wood Johnson Hospital or something. And
right.
our youth, I work with like latency age and adolescent youth who had intense traumatic experiences. Yeah. And these are prime, I believe, from what you're saying, like individuals, and I felt it too, that definitely
Mm,
needed regulation, right? Because not only were they
mhm.
adolescents, we know the adolescent body, mind, and
Agreed.
spirit, right? And they were also frequently misperceiving, right?
Mhm.
Danger, right? Like that we would often say like the barometer just needed a little bit of cleaning or a tuning or recentering,
Right.
depending on the child and what they needed. And what didn't work for me is that I often found that sometimes like the youth would be really good at also learning how to survive, let's call it that, right? Like they
Mm,
would
mhm, mhm.
I would say that they were being very resourceful, right? But a lot of my colleagues would say they were being sneaky,
Mm,
manipulative, they were working the treatment bad, they knew how to get a
right.
timeout and a cookie, and
Yeah.
and
Manipulation.
right, that's manipulation. And I find why I'm bringing this up is because I find that at the time these youth, predominantly darker skinned black and brown youth, right, would often be saying, or actually the therapist would often be saying like, "Oh, they have conduct disorder. They have intermittent explosive disorder, all these behavioral disorders."
Mm, mhm,
Behavioral,
mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
a behavioral disorder, just let that sink in, like the language of it,
Right.
right? Like the
Mhm.
behavioral disorder. And my thought would be, and I remember saying this to my supervisor, and she'd be like, good job, keep that. I'm like, but why are we not having a more compassionate? Isn't this trauma? Isn't this
Right.
a traumatic response, right? And so
Yes,
she would say like,
exactly.
"Yes, go study it, do this more." I was like, "Well, I wanna look at intergenerational trauma." "Good. Look into and I wanna look at, like, racial trauma," and at the time, it was like Dr. Tama Bryan and Dr. Robert Carter were the only people I knew, and I'm sure there were more that were talking about
Mm,
race-based traumatic stress, right? Like, in a very
mhm, mhm.
clinical way to understand how racial oppression was impacting the body, mind, and
Mhm.
spirit. So sorry for this long story,
Right.
but the purpose
Not at all.
why I'm bringing this up is because when I first was like pushing back on these behavioral disorders and how often they were assigned, right,
Mhm.
to black and brown kids who were quote unquote air quotes right now acting out and being ungovernable, it would
Yeah,
also make me think about our historical connection to being ungovernable and
absolutely.
why we needed to fucking be ungovernable,
Absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
again, coming back, this is very long, but like coming back to the nervous system, right? At that time too, we weren't talking about somatics. Like we weren't getting any
Mm,
classes as a trained clinical psychologist. So imagine these little bodies, these
mm.
adorable bodies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we're being trained in a sense to still see them and treat them through a paradigm and a lens, Asia, of like
Mm.
adults. Yeah.
Mhm.
And through a
Mhm.
paradigm and a lens where we had to see their behaviors as manipulative rather than, hey, look, I'm trying to grasp onto an extra cookie. I'm trying to take care of myself. Maybe there's not food when I get home,
I
right?
mean, it's intelligent.
Thank
It's
you.
literally intelligent. I think that's the part that is being demonized in young kids or black and brown kids. It's like, it's kinda
Right?
smart, actually.
Right? And
They're gonna
so
survive.
yeah, so then I guess, like, my question so I feel like I have a thought, but I wanna bring it back to you, someone who has so much experience and knowledge in and around the body and these systems, how for folks that are listening in and thinking like, "Okay, okay, yes, like, I am an Indigenous identified person, I'm a Black person, I'm a queer person," like, does this tending to our bodies and regulating look different for our
Mm,
bodies
mm,
as
mm.
well? What might be some of the differences? What might we need? What might some of these kids have needed that we weren't giving them?
Mm, yeah. Um, so I do want to, like, highlight this larger reality that we have our nervous systems are all the same within humans. Like nervous system is nervous system, right? And even this
Got it.
language of like big T trauma, little T trauma, that's our top-down language-based explanation. The body does not care. It does not care that this was a tsunami and that was an abusive attack. It doesn't actually care if it's big T, little t. It received an experience that created fragmentation that required it to split itself off, its consciousness, because it couldn't escape. And now it's living in that split. And of course, we have to take into consideration things like I said, frequency and duration, right? So this like prolonged neglect, these repeated um, situations where this happened, right? And the body still receives just things. If it's traumatic to the body, it was traumatic to the body. And I only bring that up because I just think it's important to remember that, like, um, to not get into these places where it's like, well, uh, you know, black people or black and brown indigenous people, queer people have to kind of do things in this way. The body
Mm,
still needs tending to. It's still a system that has all these organs, has all of these fibers. It still needs that. It's just that some people, because of the prolonged duration and frequency, will have different ways or different repetitions that they have to do. So I
mm,
don't want to get into this like sensationalism of like, here is a new manual of things to do if you're a black, brown, indigenous, queer. It's the same self-soothing. We need to bring safety and stability back into the system. That
mhm,
is square one.
mhm,
From there,
mhm.
you can start to do more remembrance and mourning and reconnection and integration. The step one across the board is safety and stability into the system.
Beautiful.
What I think needs to be very much understood is that many of us are still living in countries, in communities, in spaces that are highly unsafe.
Mm,
Like, they're not safe if you exist in a black, brown, queer, indigenous body. I mean, it depends on your social location, right? Your age, socioeconomic status, geographic location. I mean, we're not a monolith. So let's also like acknowledge that part, right? Um, but if we're still living in systems, if you're living in the West with its colonial history, I mean, this entire country is predicated on the dehumanization of anyone who is not white. So you're constantly in relics of systems that did
mhm,
not think you were human,
mhm,
that did not think you felt the same way, like on like a sensation level, right? That did not view you as with any dignity. I mean, I think the gaslighting is so infuriating that it's like, this is hundreds of years ago. XYZ. Listen, yes, there is a moment where we have to decide for ourselves, okay, I want to change my world. What can I do? Because we do always have power there, and that is the trick of despair, and that is a trick of
Mm.
ego that, like, we really are hopeless and helpless. I will I will knock that down immediately. You know, you could live in a very volatile place, you still have some capacity to improve your situation. Like, that is the free will, that is our capacity to self-heal. Okay? So, like, we have to hold this,
Yes.
and I don't think it's really made clear often, especially to the youth, because what do they know? You know, they're just copying all the adults, and they're navigating these systems sometimes unsupported. Like, they're going to school. We have no idea what's happening in the school system if you're a parent, you know? Like, so I don't think it's really said enough, and I don't think it's really steeped in us enough that we live in societies that still have systemically, systematically, and historically viewed anyone who wasn't white as less than. And that is a residue. Like,
Mm.
that is a very sticky residue. And even the joke of, like, something pops off and all the Black people just know that they just have to start running. Do you think that was just like for fun?
Mm.
It's this need to survive, right? It's this recognition that, like, I'm gonna go straight into my reptilian survival brain, and I'm not gonna ask questions. I'm gonna just remove myself. Now, if you are living, like, generationally that's been happening, you know stories, you've heard, do you think one generation is just going to come up one day and just completely be rid of that cellular memory? This is even the notion that, like, you know, our grandparents or grandmother was carrying 4 generations, like, sometimes I'm like, "Let's get out of the ego and the high intellectualism and, like, land it in body, in
Mm.
cells." I
Yes.
was in my grandmother's body. Great-grandmother, I think, actually is more, you know, apt, and that woman was in the Caribbean. I mean, we all know the history of the Caribbean in terms of slavery, like, that is in part it's part of my so it's just I'm trying to
Yeah.
really just drive the point home that, like, we need to really acknowledge our surroundings, our environment, even in this modern day and age,
Mhm.
for people to still have perspectives of Black people, perspectives of queer people. They're being passed down, even if it's not explicitly taught. There is something in the ether that is still teaching a rhetoric of dehumanization. You cannot ask people who live in bodies that experience that to just find safety and stability, like, just figure it out, just find it. No. And
Yes.
so, yeah, you know, you have to be more deliberate with the chosen family, you have to be more deliberate with the communities. If you live
Mhm.
in a very
Mhm.
racist community, you might have to think about not living there, you know? I mean, that sounds very privileged, like, "Hey, what if I have a house? What if my" I understand, and I'm really not here to just sort of, like, snap my fingers and tell you to change your life. It's just that this reconfiguration, it's necessary. It is necessary because you do have to find safety and stability before you can really start to embrace what has happened to you and start to heal. And if you don't feel safe in your neighborhood, in your partnership, in your job, I mean, be real with yourself about what you think you can achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for all of that. And I think as you're talking, what I keep thinking about are the poly crises that we're
Mhm.
experiencing globally, right? And
Yeah.
multiple crises, concurrent genocides. Um,
Yes.
we're dealing with many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being unhoused without their basic tenants and needs. The
Mhm.
level of isolation and loneliness that folks
Yeah.
have been experiencing. Um, by the time this comes out, it'll probably be a month or 2 later, but we're fresh on the heels of the LA fires. So
Yes.
there is just a heaviness, you
Mhm.
know, and a grief, and
Mhm.
during these times, I'm finding that many folks are thinking about possessions, materialism.
Right.
They're looking right. They're looking towards books and history and science fiction that can remind us. Come on, like Parable of the Sower and Octavia Butler, beautifully
Right.
was able to look at the future, right? True
Mm.
Afrofuturism. Look at the
Mhm.
future based off of behaviors and actions of what had been occurring. It was a wonderful
Mhm.
attestment to someone being able to be in attunement, I believe. Like a healthy form of
Mhm.
attunement with self, blackness,
Mhm.
body,
Mhm.
mind, spirit, and the environment we live in as a way to survive, right? And then
Mhm.
to like in fiction or not format, warn or forewarn or just say, hey, these are possibilities based
Mm.
on these experiences. And so, um, lot of area that I'm interested in is the rage and the grief, right? And the rage in particular. So, my students lovingly coined me the rage doctor. They'd be like, "Oh, that's my therapist. She's the rage doctor." And I'd be like, "Oh
Yep.
my goodness, how?" Or I'd walk into a space on camp when I worked at a university for 13 years in Jersey City. One time the whole football team was like, "Rage doctor," and I'm like, my colleagues
Wow, I don't know.
was like, and then my dean came over, was like, "We should meet." And I'm like, yeah."
You're like,
But
about that.
right, about that. But yeah, I think that it's personal to me and my life and my family and how I grew up as a teenager being forced to lead with
Mm.
this unbridled, unkept, unloved rage to
Mm.
years to then going on a retreat with Ruth King when I could barely ever afford it as a grad student
Mm.
and being submerged into rage having disguises. And Ruth King, in her beautiful book, Healing Rage, breaks them down into these fight, flight, freeze responses, right?
Oh,
Right? This is why I'm
okay.
like, so
Curious.
yes, yes. So let me see if I can remember this. Okay. So, um, what I want to say is that not only do I think this is absolutely helpful, I think it is essential, especially this day and age, right? To be able to understand. So, Ruth would say that rage is the love child of um, childhood trauma and shame.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in our discussions, she is supportive of my addition that rage, sacred rage, is the love child of shame, of ancestral trauma, and of
Oh.
suffocated grief, right? Of this
Uh-huh.
grief that is not sort of societally allowed to come up and
Right.
be seen. And so
Mhm.
Ruth would also say in her book, she like beautifully unpacks, and Ruth was one of our podcast participants, one of our guests early
Yeah.
on. So listeners, you can go back and listen to that and learn a little bit more about rage and mindfulness and Buddhism. Um, but that there's a dominant type. So there's defiance, right? And
Mm.
let me
Mhm.
see, there's dominance and defiance, which would be the fight types. Right, fight. If we're
Yes.
thinking of like
Okay.
the nervous system responses, yeah, is that appropriate for
Mhm.
me to say
Yep.
that?
Yep. Yep.
And then
Yep.
there are the flight types, which are distraction, which is one of my highest,
Okay.
and devotion, like overly, like
Hmm.
unconsciously distracting ourselves. And these are masks of rage, right? So
Yes.
oftentimes
Right.
Black women are not allowed, air quotes, to just like, fuck that, like, be
Yeah.
all pissed
Yeah.
off and be all aggressive and, you know,
Yes.
punch people in the face out of nowhere, not saying that they should either. I'm just as an example,
Right,
right?
right,
That
right.
that can mean death and
Yeah.
destruction for us. Um, so then there's also the freeze types would be
Hmm.
dependence and depression, but not depression in a clinical sense. Depression like going within, not having any interest in things we used to, feeling like a
Okay.
flattened sense of affect. And Ruth would say that, these are ways that these disguises have protected us consciously or
Mhm.
unconsciously for a while. And
Mhm.
she didn't add any fun ones in yet. But I just wondered, your thoughts around big feelings like rage and anger and even overwhelming grief and
Mm.
the nervous system.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And feel free to disagree with any of
Um,
this too, right?
well, I mean, I'm now hearing it, so I just cannot fix my lips to disagree with something I barely even read. That's just too arrogant for me. Um, but I do find it fascinating that the distraction being flight. That's, I mean, it
Mm.
sounds like the busying that we do, to kind of avoid the actually having to be confronted with the thing.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I enjoy like these concepts of like these dichotomies, right? I know things don't exist, and like we named at the beginning, the black and white thinking is residue that I'm
Mm.
socialized in as well. But I think of like, fear and love and like love and loss. And I'm saying this because there's like that running quote that's like I sat with my anger long enough and its name was grief. So um, I feel a lot of comfort when I am able to see in this dichotomy of it's either I'm moving, there's either something loving, like there's a love expression happening here, or there's a loss expression happening here.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, grief, right? It's like it's the sorrow, it's the sadness. And then if we sat with the anger and the rage similarly, there is something that you deeply love that is lost, being lost. Something is bringing intense sadness. And anger is a very transformative emotion, right? I do believe in it. I do believe in anger and rage being very necessary and vital expressions, truly. Um, with anything, right? We can overdo it. And uh, being excessively and continually, or rather incessantly, like angry will fry your nervous system,
Mm.
will literally set your system on fire. It will
Mm.
become an act of self poisoning. And I
Mm.
think maybe I should name specifically when I say that the holding in of anger for sure is that self poisoning,
Mm.
even as we express it, right? It's like we want to encourage a consciousness of like, okay, as I express this anger in hopes of it being transformative, you know, how do I want to meet it, right? Do I want to meet it like it's my last tool that I'm going to have to wield? Is it the first thing that I'm wielding? Do I believe it's the only way to get things done? And it's just to allow anger to have its rightful place, because it's not something that we need to be using all the time. It is, we don't need to burn things all the time for change.
Mm.
We do have to burn things, period. All the time. It's just, it can get out of hand. I mean, things are burning as we speak,
Yeah.
right? It can spread, right? So it's just about being mindful that like when we are used to all of the pressure, the pressing, right? The suppress, the repress, when we are used to all the pressure going down and keeping it in, that will naturally create some congestion and some constipation.
Mm.
And in order to clear that, there you need to have an explosive and almost an eruptive. There needs to be a pressure to push that all out, which is the anger, which is the rage. So often I find that when things can be moved with a certain like frequency, it's not something, the rage and the anger, they come and then they go. It's not this like person in New York who's like, "Wah," and then the honk is going for like the whole block, and you're like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, "Wah." You're like, dude, stop honking, right? So it comes up to clear, like
Oh,
it
God.
comes up to clear what has been
Mm.
suppressed. And when we get used to expressing ourselves more and letting our boundaries be known and like letting someone know like that was not right. It's not right for you to, do that to someone else. Like our anger is a wonderful tool, but if it's just this like knee jerk, unconscious spraying, then it's hazardous, and it's not going to be the transformation that you think, and you'll probably be the one getting burned as well.
Mm.
So I think that like when it comes, it comes. And once again, curiosity is your homie. Like if you can just be like, oh, okay, this is the second time in a day that I feel like I'm raging. Martha Beck talks about this concept of free floating hostility. I said it a few, earlier. Like when you are contacting free floating hostility, something needs to be expressed. There is
Right.
something going on with you that is not getting heard. Right? If you're just like snapping at people and just like flipping and what? No. What is going on, So that's so I think those emotions are important. I think they're vital. I think most of them will be funneled down to grief.
Mm.
There is a loss that's occurring, there is a sadness that's occurring, and many times it's probably valid.
Yeah.
So it's not to kind of get back to grief and be like, "Oh, I'm sad, let me get away." No,
Mhm.
it's just to see it because that through line allows for consciousness. And
Yeah.
then when you consciously wield anger, it's very different than unconsciously wielding it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, for me, if they're gonna be in close relationship with me, and I mean close, close, maybe not just like, oh, sort of friends, but I notice
Right.
that when I'm starting to feel sad, and usually, when I'm doing like work around rage, I remind people that it is this continuum, right?
Mhm,
And that my work with them is that rage is just asking to be acknowledged and seen and that we build a relationship with it, right? Like, so pretty much
mhm,
like what you're saying, so that where there's not this demonizing and
mm,
suppressing of what is coming up. But if I start
mhm.
to feel irritable really, really often and I'm
Right.
snapping at people close to me and I'm just like nothing works and I just have this like if I describe it as like something is like itching under my skin, even if it's
Mhm.
not, is what it's like I can't get at a scratch at an itch.
Yeah.
And usually it means that I'm really like needing to look at sadness, right? That I'm needing
Mhm.
to look at something that I'm feeling I lost or I'm losing or I have no
Yes.
control over or I'm not verbalizing something. And I wouldn't say that rage or anger is like, well, maybe now in my life that I'm more comfortable with, but that doesn't mean that I'm expelling it. It just means
Mm.
it can come into my consciousness a little bit quicker. I hope that makes sense. Whereas
Uh-huh.
grief, I have a tendency to be like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm not sad. Oh, no, 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 no." And then it'll
Oh.
smash me like,
Ooh.
and then I'm
What's
out for the
that
count.
about?
Well, girl. Well, we can spend a whole hour. Well, in a sentence, in truth, in realness, because that's a question I have for you is like, where do you find yourself tending to one place or another a little bit more? Because for me, my environment dictated
Mm.
that I was gonna get slapped up if grief
Mhm.
was a constant, right? And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that's
Mhm.
right. I'm saying my environment dictated that I needed to be tough, even if I didn't feel it
Mhm.
inside. That even if I was crying, I needed to find strength to suck it the F
Mhm.
up,
Mhm.
to move on, and to be more in alignment with whatever survival instinct I could grasp and attract. So
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
nutshell. And yet
Mhm.
if I was around mom only, then I was allowed, like mom and grandmother and aunt, then I was
Mm.
allowed,
I'm seeing a
right?
pattern.
Right? To be well, I wonder what that pattern to be softer, to be cute, to
Right.
almost allow femininity, and it
Mhm.
needed to come out. If it didn't, they're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, don't be a, air quotes, tomboy, don't this or that." So
Mm.
that's for
Mm.
me where it came up, but survival was more consistent in my life. That survival energy, then you get to sit and relax and just be soft. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, so, my system houses quite a bit of intensity, and I was very, I had a very revealing reflection, a few years ago that basically corroborated this intensity. Because for a while I was like, "This what's going on?" "Oh my god, you have so much energy, da, da, da. You're like an Energizer bunny," It's just like all this stuff, and I'm just like, "Okay, do people not have energy? I don't even get it. So it corroborated that, and that was the beginning of what I would say this entire journey that many people are now kind of arriving at. Like this was a long time coming. Like there was a lot of this going on. And when I do this, I mean like just waves right with my hand if those who are listening. But um I came to this understanding maybe a year ago that what I experience as the human, not purpose, I think that's a very big word, but one major experience of being human is being able to hold tension between what we feel like are contradictions, or rather like a lot of the poets will talk about like the wisdom in opposites,
Mm.
right? And this idea of like, how would you ever know center if you don't know the edges of the continuum,
Mm.
right? And we will find ourselves pinging between these two edges when we've spent a lot of time in one. I mean, the pendulum must swing. It's not going to be like, "I'm gonna get to balance." Like, how does it know where balance is? It has to go to the other end, and then it can slowly start to. So I think so much of the conflict and the just the challenges of being human is that we are meant to hold these two and honor these two ends of our existence, this spirit that's in a body, this intense sadness with like joie de vivre, like. And I just think because of the paradigms we're conditioned into, where it's like you said, the black and white, right? This adolescent, that brain that must like choose, it's either or. It's really affecting people's capacity to develop capacity, like
Mm.
to develop bandwidth, to
Mm.
develop space in their being to say like, I'm really sad and I'm also incredibly grateful, which for some people, when they talk, it's like, and it's not that I'm not happy about it. It's just that, and it's just like, you can totally be happy about it and still have your gripes. Like, there is no but. Even the language of but suggests everything that came before is actually going to be negated in what you say after. It's just language is a funny thing, and I know that it's just there to support our expression of soul, truly. So I say all of that to say that there's room for everything for me. I really have learned that I don't need to choose or adhere or to be devoted to one.
Mm.
It just strips me of the expansiveness of my experience. And if I notice that I'm jagging on one thing where it's like I cannot access any gratitude in this particular thing, then I just have to ask myself, what small part of me is not getting nourished, or what is it about this? And most of the time it will reveal itself because it actually wants you to ask, it wants you to be curious. And I just think we don't trust our system, we don't trust a organizing principle that puts these insinuations, puts these inspirations in us. Like, it wants I was just watching Lord of the Rings, it wants to be found.
It
Like,
wants
it
to be
just
found.
it wants to the ring wants to be found. Like, you want to be found.
Yes.
Like, you want to be found. And when it tries to come through and then it's shut down, or it's just a lot. It's a lot. So if you can hold it without any attachment, without any like meaning making sometimes, just see what
Yeah.
it transpires into, then you can make your decisions. So
Mm.
so yeah, I think it's important to hold those ends of the spectrum for sure.
Yeah. And it kind of, thank you for that. And it goes full circle to what you were saying in the beginning, right? Like they're really being able to hold those tensions and not
Mhm.
needing for it to sound one way or another, not needing to be so rigid with the
Yeah.
regulation, right? Is
Yeah.
what I hear you
Right.
saying. I could be wrong. That's
Yes.
what I hear you saying. And um I'm wondering, you know, here you are now. I'm not gonna ask you how old you are. You can tell us, whatever, but my question is for you was whether like 10-year-old you would be like digging this, maybe not like the intellectual aspects of the conversation, but just like did 10-year-old you know how to naturally find some balance or spaces and places and edges of balance? Was 10-year-old you naturally hyper and intense as a way of getting out and finding some balance of what regulation could be
Mm,
like? Yeah. Yeah.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, this reflecting back on my existence is just slippery slope emotionally. Like, I think I feel like I have this running joke where I don't remember my childhood, and I'm like, okay, that might mean that there were some things there, but I genuinely don't believe there were things like there was no abuse per se. Like there's nothing there in that like I've blacked out my memory kind of thing. I just think that um there was so much that I didn't know about myself that has clarified, like I said, over the last few years, that I can sense why my memories from my childhood are a little bit more like attenuated. Like they're a little bit more dull.
Yeah.
Like I can remember, it's like I can remember it in grayscale. Not that it was
Mhm.
sad or anything, but only some parts have very vibrant color, and then other times it just feels like it's just like washed
Yeah.
over a bit.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think I my family's structure is deeply supportive and very loving. I think the way I was experiencing, like, my family's faith at that time, um, being in, like, predominantly white spaces, like, born and raised in Canada, like, all of my homegirls growing up were white. So there was so much lack of authenticity, which I think is, like, understandable, like, as a 10-year-old, like, how authentic are you? You don't even know you. You
Yeah.
don't even know yourself, so how authentic are you gonna be, you know? But I think just as if I reflect, I'm just like, "Oh, I was kind of just going through the motions," and, thankfully, I had a pretty, like, solid family unit.
Yeah.
Even within that unit though, there was, dogma from the faith and, just like a lack of understanding of like how Asia is oriented in her
Yeah.
intensity and
Yeah.
complexity. So it was never shamed, but it just wasn't like propped up,
Yeah.
right? So it was just like kind of just there.
Yeah.
Um, but uh I think and I think I spent a lot of time a little bit out of my physicality. Like, I knew I had to physically do things to satisfy this intensity of movement, but I spent a lot of time dissociating, to be honest, because I feel like
Mhm.
the white social dynamic was rough. Being Muslim in that dynamic is rough. Like being a Caribbean person with no Muslim family was rough. Like there was
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
lot of things that were causing interruptions. So to be on this other side is like the best thing ever. Truly, I could not be more content
Mm.
at all. There is nothing else that I would have asked for so far. And so it's like, yeah, I can feel it. I can feel myself a little like water. I can feel the water rising a little
Mm.
bit for me of just like recognizing that this is the place that I like yearned to be in. And I think maybe that's why it comes through a lot more unapologetically and a lot more like confidently because it was always like a hum in my being, but there were so many environmental like the word coming to me is like castrations, which is so
Okay.
violent, but it felt like that. It was like a severing, of like that energy to be able to blossom
Yeah.
because of just the environment I was raised in that was stable in some ways and very destabilizing in other ways, right? So yeah, no, I being on the other side is just like the biggest chef's kiss blessing there is, yeah, to have all this come through now.
Beautiful. My hope is that you're really able to continue to let yourself receive that, and continue to receive all of the ways that you swam upstream, downstream, and allowed yourself to show up more. I can really identify with that, right? Like people are like, how did you get to
Mm,
be such a big mouth? Or how did you this? Or how do you push back against because there was no other choice, right? Because this is what I had
Mhm.
grown into. This is what
Yep.
my development, all of my teachers' teachings, unbeknownst to myself, all of the trials and tribulations led to, which is
Mhm.
fucking say something or perish.
Pretty
Right? Like
much.
for real.
Pretty
So
much.
and
Like,
although
for
it may
real.
look different for both of us, I can really identify with the feeling behind what you're saying. So thank you.
Mm,
And
thank
I'm
you for
wondering, I'm like, I
that.
want to keep going, but maybe we'll just have to have feedback. But I want to honor our time and the potency of what you're also been sharing. And um, I suppose I'm wondering, is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is like really important to note or say something about
Hmm.
right now? I know we bounced around and float around like water, water and air, maybe.
Yeah. Um, I feel like I didn't speak enough about God. So
Okay.
I just want to put a little pin that, you know, spirit, like that kind of tether in this material experience has been beyond my imagination as support. And so I just want to I need to pin that because truly that is the only entity that has accompanied me up until this point, for everything, right? So just naming that relationship to something much bigger, much higher has allowed for a lot of the noise and a lot of that um like distillation to happen truly. Um yeah, I think I want to punctuate it with that. I think
Beautiful.
that would feel very very
Beautiful.
authentic to end it with that. Yeah.
Thank you. I also want to ask, so how can folks, the folks are like, oh my gosh, I need to connect with Sia. I need, how do you do this? What do you do? What are you doing now? Like, what do you do? Right? Like, what do you do?
Right. What do
Uh,
I do?
do you do?
I am a clinically trained speech language pathologist, so I be assessing, evaluating, and treating anyone who has communication impairments. And that's like bread and butter. Grateful that I have that so that I can allow for a coaching container where we do some of that attunement talking and, synthesis. And I'm actually with Creative Child. You can't see my stomach, but my hands are on my stomach. I'm with Creative Child. I'm actually with triplets.
What?
Um, but truly, I would love to birth a few things in the spring. I'm really respecting that. This is not it's winter. Like I'm probably gonna go back to bed soon after it's all said and done. But I do want to create some spaces for like grief communing. I'm trying to put some more, retreats on the map and some mentoring programs. I actually am finishing up a training in giftedness, which is the complexity that was the reflection that was shared with me a few years ago. And so I would just say if you go to siaontheotherside.com, there's a footer where you can sign up for the newsletter Coalesce. I do not send them out often. I am not into relevance scarcity. Like I'm here and I'm exists and that's about it.
We love it.
And so yeah, if there's any curiosity there or on Instagram, you just say hi. It's not that deep. You can just say what's up. Thanks, thanks for XYZ, or just like let me see your humanity and you see mine, and that's also enough for me. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Asia, for the expansiveness in which you create in spaces that you step into, especially this space.
Mhm.
And I'd like to remind our viewers or listeners, however you're engaging with us, to make sure you tend to your garden today, whatever that looks like for you. And I'm not saying this in a cheesy way, right? Like a little extra water, a little bit more carb, protein, whatever you want, fat, whatever, a dance party after this, right? Maybe some gentle movement, but we will never again be in this place, at this space, at this time with these feelings in this body,
Mhm.
right? With
Mhm.
Asia and myself. And so I am deeply grateful to you folks. Asia's information will be in the show notes as well. So you'll have access to that and website and any other beautiful tinklings and creative birthings that will happen between now and the launching. Congratulations on your creative impregnations,
Conception.
triple conceptions.
Conception.
I'm loving this for you, and thank you, everyone. My ask, as always, is that you continue to connect with your communities, with your bodies, with yourself, with your pod, and may you continue to enjoy this podcast, continue to listen on, share it with friends, and continue to find ways to lovingly inspire new paradigms, crush old raggedy ones, right? That ain't working for ain't working for nobody, right? And that you continue to step more lively into your motherfucking authenticity and truth, because we need more of that.
Ooh, whoop. Ooh, whoop. Absolutely. Thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you. From Root to Bone is a podcast from Decolonizing Therapy. It is hosted by me, Dr. Jenn Mullen. Our producer is Tribble at Ash Tribble Incorporated. Original music by Laura Burke and cover art by Madre Shell. Don't forget to find us on Instagram at Decolonizing Therapy and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Decolonizing Therapy, for the full video version of each episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your people and leave us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps people find us. For more info about Decolonizing Therapy, visit our website, www.decolonizingtherapy.com. Be well.